In this episode, we're here with Jason Fladlien, the GOAT of webinars.
I know personally in my pocket, I've made enough money to not necessarily have to worry about the concept of money again.
Jason is known as the $100 million webinar man and the guy behind the guy.
Why am I known? I have 100 million reasons why I'm known, which is the results that webinars have produced.
We discuss how to smoothly transition into the sales portion of your webinar, rapid fire questions, the most important things you need to know when it comes to webinars, and what market positioning is and how to use it to dominate your space.
Because there's only one position to be in, and that's the number one position. If you aren't in the number one position, start something that can make you into the number one position. Pivot if you must, or change or open up a new business unit.
Everyone wants to be great, but only few actually get there. And I'm on a mission to find out what all the greatest have in common. I've traveled tirelessly to find, sit down, and talk with GOATs, people that are arguably the greatest of all time at what they do. Sales, marketing, advertising, business, podcasts, branding, you name it. The way they do things may be different, but they all seem to see the world the same way. To them, success is not only achievable, but inevitable. And we'll get inside their heads as they share their expertise with me each week. My name's Mike Arce, and this is The GOAT Show. This episode is sponsored by Loud Rumor. If you own a fitness studio, cryotherapy, or massage business, there is no company in the industry better at generating high-quality leads than Loud Rumor. In just the last 2 years, Loud Rumor has worked with nearly 1,000 fitness and wellness companies and won ranking Arizona's Ad Agency of the Year in 2017. Getting more paying members in the door can be tough. Let Loud Rumor do the heavy lifting and get new people in your doors every day. Go to loudrumor.com and learn more. Also sponsored by Agency G.O.A.T.s. Starting a digital agency was definitely one of the best decisions I've ever made. Building it, however, was a lot more challenging than I expected. I always wish someone just gave me a roadmap that I could follow and just let me be a fly on the wall at the successful agencies out there so I could really see how it's done. Agency G.O.A.T.s allows you to do just that. Stop playing small and visit agencygsd.com to learn how to help hundreds of clients get it to 7 figures and be extremely profitable along the way. Again, go to agencygsd.com. Hello, welcome back to another episode of The GOAT Show. I'm your host, Mike Arce, and today we've got the GOAT of webinars, Mr. Jason Fladlien. Jason, welcome to The GOAT Show. How you doing, man?
Mike, I feel like I should be eating grass or something right now. What do goats eat? Oats and goats? I don't know. I'm ready to.
You've been eating business for a long time, man. You're full. You're getting real full. A lot of people want to know how they can get a share. And that's what this show is about, is giving people a little share of what you've got. Because from what I understand, I told you this when we talked on the phone a few days ago. There's this documentary on Netflix called what was it? What was the name of that documentary? It's like The Guy Behind the Guy. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do not, but I like the concept of the man behind the man.
So
right?
I'm going to get the title, and actually let's put it up on the screen so we can get up on the screen. But it's this documentary, this guy that nobody knows unless you're like a real player in the game. So like Tom Cruise, Richard Branson, Tony Robbins, all these guys. Supermensch. You got it. Supermensch. So Supermensch is like this guy that no one knows except for the main guys that everybody knows. He's the guy behind the guy. And when I talked to you, I was like, Jason Fladlien's kind of like the guy behind the guy, because he's not big and flashy like a lot of these guys that we see up on, and other guys we've had on the GOAT Show where everyone knows he got tons of followers. You're the guy that helps make a lot of these big organizations make more money through webinars and through market positioning, another thing that you do really well. And you're really the guy behind the guy. And unless you're really in the circle, you've never really heard of you. But if you're in the circle, everyone's like, no, Jason Fladlien, he's the man. I've heard about 5 people say that already that are big time. So Jason, what makes you to go to webinar? How long have you been doing webinars? And then what do you think got you to the point where you're the GOAT?
Great question. So I started doing webinars in 2008. I would have started sooner, but the technology wasn't in place where and the market wasn't ready yet. They're like, webinar, what is that? I mean, I think the word webinar is a stupid word anyway. It's just like an online seminar, a web seminar, but it's stuck, like things stick. And so I started doing it in 2008 when there was no playbook. I had nobody to study it from, nor did I have any past successes really. So I didn't have anything to pour over. And so because I had a blank slate and I was just willing to try whatever, I kind of pioneered the model that many people now use today, whether they realize it or not, whether they learned it directly through me or learned it from somebody who learned it from me, the guy behind the guy, right?
Right.
Well, so to answer the other question though, Mike, is why am I known? I have 100 million reasons why I'm known, which is the results that webinars have produced that I've scripted, created, or been behind or been in front of. And so when it comes to the results of webinars, ours are unbelievable. Let's just call it that. It's hard for me to believe some of the webinars that I've designed with the small amount of traffic they've gotten, how much money they've produced.
How much money would you say you've produced through webinars?
So we hold the record for the biggest affiliate promotion of all time in the internet marketing space. And we've sold $9.8 million of somebody else's product in 8 days. And that was mainly off of a single webinar that I designed that I have reused for 6 or 7 years that has produced over $25 million. And we're talking, Mike, 5,000 people may have really tuned into it, maybe 10,000 people, somewhere in that range. It's not like we had 1 million people on the call.
Right. Wow. What was it? Are we allowed to talk about what it was?
Oh, yeah, totally. And some of this is timing too. So I'm not going to pretend that it's all the magic touch of webinars, because if it was, I would do $10 million on every single webinar, right? Right. So there was a product called Amazing Selling Machine that came out in 2013 that we were there for launch number 1. We were the number 1 affiliate for that. Then they reopened 6 months later. We were the number 1 affiliate for that. And then the 3rd and 4th time, we were also the number 1 affiliates. And then on the 5th time, for whatever reason, like we had developed enough insight into the market, we had understood the objections of the customers better than anybody else, and we developed massive bonuses that were exclusive that you couldn't get on their own, but you could get them for free if you bought through our affiliate link. And one of the things that we did was really clever, Mike, is we went to our competitors, and this was the pitch that I said to them. I said, listen, you can promote on your own. Or you could promote with me, split the profits. That would mean you'd have to double your sales in order to break even, which I don't know if I can do. But I will. But I can promise you the following: it'll be the easiest promotion you've ever done in your life because I'm doing all the work, and your customers are going to get the best experience. Because look at what we've been able to do with all these customers and their results and our bonuses and our extra resources. Like we were building $1 million businesses, Mike, like in cost, to give away for free as a bonus to this product because it was producing so much money. It was unheard of. It was insane. But the key differentiator is how do you communicate that value in the marketplace? That's what the webinar did. It was a way to wrap up every awesome, amazing thing we were doing into a short, interactive experience so customers could decide, oh, this makes sense for us to buy. And on the back of that, we did 9.8 just on that one launch million. And real marketing is in the back end. Doing webinars to existing customers is going to make you so much more money, which is why I'm not at all well known. I don't have Facebook. I have no real following, but I've really optimized on the money perspective because you get 1,000 really good customers, you make them successful. It's hard to stop making money in that situation. So the customers we received from that $9.8 million was the good start to unlocking many other millions of dollars, mostly gotten through webinars.
9.8 is what you made in 8 days. What would you say if you had to put a number on it? How much money would you say you've made through webinars since 2008? It's 12 years.
Yeah.
For yourself, for others, everybody.
Yeah, grossed over 100 million easily. Last time I quit counting that in 2017, 2018. It's certainly more than that. I know personally in my pocket, I've made enough money to not necessarily have to worry about the concept of money again.
That's pretty awesome.
So all I know is it's been really good to me. And I've loved the fact that over the years, Mike, people have thought webinars are dead. And if they're dead, I don't want them to be alive again. And so we have been able to see webinars through for 13 years almost now with no end in sight. Now the model maybe changes here and there, but For the most part, if you understand the concept, it's an interactive way of communicating with a customer base or an audience that can be up to the moment, fresh, and it's very engaging and it's very interactive. But here's the best part: is it's always value first. The way that we design webinars is it is fundamentally to solve this thing. I want to give you the taste of what it's like to be my customer before you have to risk being my customer. So if I can show you through insight, aha moments, paradigm shifts, identity shifts, breaking old behavior patterns and establishing new ones, and I can do that in 45 minutes, and you can say, holy crap, I've never had a better experience in my life related to this subject before I met this guy, right? Then it's not a risk for you to give me money, because then you're like, okay, let's see what he's got behind the paywall. And that's what we attempt to do. Let me give you value first. Let me change your life for the better. Aha, revolutionize you. And then in return, I just ask you to spend a little bit of money with me. Now, if you like it, maybe you'll spend some more money with me. But that's the fundamental premise of really what I try to bring into every webinar.
You know, my specialty, for anybody that knows me well, is more of one-on-one sales. I'm not good yet. I know with practice I can be, but I'm not, because I don't practice it nearly as much as you probably did in your first 6 months of my whole life. Webinars or selling from stage. That's not something that I've put into practice and put in the time like you have. One-on-one, I'm very good. And what I've learned is when I'm out and I'm talking to people, I naturally find myself using the same techniques and strategies that I've learned to use in prospects to communicate. I use it in normal conversation with friends, family. Even though I'm not wanting to sell them anything, I just learned it's a better way of communicating. And I say that because when I first got on the phone with you about a week ago, or I don't know when it was, maybe it was only a few days ago, we started off the conversation maybe about a minute or two, and then I got right into it, and I said, so how do you make your money, man? Like, where do you get your income from? And I felt it. I felt myself go into a webinar. You even had like a webinar voice, and you said, well, Mike, before I answer that question, I think it's important for me to give you a little bit of a backstory so you can see how I got here. And I'm like, this guy is taking me through a whole thing. I already see it happening, and you took me through. And you started giving me this backstory where you started, your struggles, how you've messed up, and then all of a sudden you found something, and then you were able to really use that. And then once you tested it again and it worked, you tested it again, it worked. And next thing you knew, it was your thing. And I'm like, I like what he's doing because I'm actually seeing the story. It's a great way of communicating. But then inside of about 45 minutes, like a typical webinar, I'm wanting to work with you. And I asked you, I'm like, how do we get you to work with us? How do we do it? And so, yeah. But that just shows mastery that you've learned how to communicate that way. And that when you do it that way, you're able to get your message across really well. So I'd like to first ask you, was that intentional, or are you just like unconsciously competent now that that's just how you communicate when you're basically positioning yourself in front of somebody new?
It's a fantastic question because it's both. The best thing you can do on a webinar if you want to be successful is to be as authentic as you possibly can be. Now, authenticity is not a substitute for incompetency, right? So what I mean by that is, let's say you're somebody who's shy and you're like, I can't do a webinar because I'm too scared to get on a webinar. That is playing small. You can be authentic in your desire to serve and still be shy. And the way that we would solve that would be essentially to get on the call and on a webinar. And that's how we'd start the webinar. We'd say, listen, I'd like to share this with you today, but I have one big problem. And here's what it is. I'm scared out of my freaking mind right now. I'm nervous. I'm sweating bullets. If you hear my voice crack, it's because I am afraid of speaking in front of even small groups of people. However, because this message is so important, I'm going to set aside my own personal hangups to try and attempt to serve you. Is that cool with you? And people will resonate with that because you are not trying to be something you're not. You're trying to be more of who you already are, but in a purposeful way that has the most amount of impact. And so I'm naturally a guy, Mike, that is like, I study communication constantly. And I'm like, what makes communication work? What are the different contexts for communication, so on and so forth. And what I've discovered is if you can't set the stage to make the point, to bring home the punchline, then it has very little impact. But if you can set up what your big message is and get people engaged and get them bought into it, then when you do have a message, it lands with more impact. And I feel like I have a worthwhile message to give. So, when Mike says, tell me how you make your money, I can't just say to him, well, I make it this way, because it doesn't really tell it, right? So instead, I got to set the stage. It's like, I'm glad you asked that question, Mike. If it's okay with you, let's break down a little backstory first. Now, some of that is technique, and not technique I'm doing consciously anymore. It's ingrained technique. Technically we call that push-pull. So I give you some, but I take some away. I share some with you, but I leave you in suspense, right? That's real effective communication, whether it's one-on-one selling, whether it's one-to-many selling, one-to-few selling, in person, on video, in podcast, what have you, right? This tension of the drama of what's going to happen next will captivate you, will get you interested. And I feel it's my duty, if I have something good to say, to not just have good content, but have a good way of communicating that content in the most engaging, most encapturing way possible. Otherwise, I'm going to lose the 6,000 memes that are scrolling up and down your Facebook feed, right? But the other part of it is my attitude, Mike, is kind of like, I like to get into it. So you've already heard it, and this is just me, of when I'm like, I like it when people give me money. My goal is to get you to give me money. My attitude is I expect that commerce happens when a fair exchange is made of my value for your money. And so I bring that with me into every single conversation that I have. And that's how it shows up. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be but whatever your is you, however you represent yourself, that's really powerful if you can show up that way in your communication, especially in a one-to-many situation. Where you can show up and people get the immediate impression of this is who this person is. This is what they stand for. Therefore, they can be a leader when it relates to whatever the topic or whatever the subject is. And so that's where a lot of that comes from. But, the other thing too, Mike, is it's hard to substitute thousands of hours of practice as well. The first year I was doing webinars, I would just keep talking if people would keep listening. Now, part of the reason was financially, it made sense. Okay, so I came from nothing. Let's just be very clear here. I was absolutely broke. The first business I started was in an efficiency apartment where the living room was the bedroom, was the office. I couldn't put both a bed and a desk in there, so I slept on the floor so I could work at the desk, right? And so I would start selling these $100, $200 products. And I might have 50 people on the webinar, and I would be done with my presentation. I got no more slides, but I got some people asking questions and such. So I would just keep going, and it seems interested. And so an hour would go by and I'd squeeze out a sale. So I make $100, right? $100 an hour back then was nothing for me to sneeze at, a small Iowa boy like I was, right?
Right.
But there was still people talking, Mike. So I go another hour, make another sale. I'm like, I'm $200 to the richer. What I didn't realize doing that for 6 months straight is I learned so much by being in the field and constantly trying new technique. Sometimes, Mike, out of boredom, I'm like, listen, we've all said it the same way for 100 times. Let me just try the exact opposite for nothing other than to entertain myself. And by the way, some of my biggest breakthroughs have come in the webinar field from that. So I try to be like Michael Jordan, try to be the best and also work harder than the rest too.
So two things I want to bring up. Number one, I'm a big Seinfeld fan. I don't know if you ever watched Seinfeld.
Love it.
And there's an episode where George Costanza says, you know what, nothing I do works. I'm just going to start doing the exact opposite of all my natural instincts.
Okay, so now I will do the opposite, and I will do something.
And his whole life starts getting better because it was the exact opposite. And you just reminded me when you were like, you know what, let's do the exact opposite of what I normally do. And the second thing I want to bring up, earlier you said something that I actually am going to take with me right now because I can't wait to use it and it'd be true and authentic. You said you got on a webinar, you'll get on a webinar and you'll say, even though you've done it a million times, you're the GOAT of webinars, even though you've done it so many times, you'll still let people know that you're nervous and this is uncomfortable for you. Because no matter what, even me, when I get in a big pitch, I'm still nervous. Even though I've done hundreds and hundreds of these, I still get nervous, right? And so I'll sometimes go and I'll meet with these big franchise heads, and these deals could be $2, $3, $4 million deals. And I just go in there. One thing I'm going to test next time is what you just said, because it's true. Just walk in there, and as soon as it starts, say, hey, just so you guys know, I'm a little nervous about today. When they say nervous, why? I don't want to mess this up. I really want to work with you guys. I know I can help, and I'm afraid that if I don't do it as good as I know I should, you guys may not know that one day. So bear with me as I get through it. And I think by doing that, because I could see if someone did that to me, I'd appreciate that. And I'd almost look for ways to work with them. There's that empathy there, as opposed to here's this guy coming in all cocky, knows his stuff. Not that I go in cocky, but just not messing up, polished. So I'm going to actually test that. And it would be authentic, because every time I do go into those meetings, I am a little nervous. A big trip I make sometimes to get a big deal done that could change the course of our company.
Absolutely. And so again, the idea is to affirm the truth, but we have to be in tune with the truth. And so if you go in there and you say, hey, listen, there's a lot riding on this, not so much the money, it's because I know what I can do for you in exchange to get it and how much we can be impacted. But I'm worried that you might look at me as just some guy trying to sell you something. You might not notice the difference between me and any other companies. And yes, I don't want that to happen. So how can we work together to figure out the best way for all of us to proceed forward? And now they conspire to help you make the sale, which is one of my favorite positions to get in, is to make my customers help me know how to sell them, for example. I'll give you another one. This is what I teach most people when they get started with webinars, Mike. And I gave you a variation of this when we talked on the phone. For many years, this is how I started webinars, because I used to be very uncomfortable doing webinars because I felt they were like a bait and switch. It was like, come here and learn this thing for free. Oh, now we got them. Let's sell them something, you know? It's like people for many years, and in certain markets still to this day, believe that we're just kindly giving out knowledge for free with nothing in return, you know? And they're shocked, God forbid, when somebody switches into pitch mode, right? So I was uncomfortable with that concept at first. So the question I always ask myself is, how can we turn the limitation into the advantage? So I used to start webinars like this. I say, listen, I have two objectives here today. My first objective is to show you how to do blank. And I'd make some big promise, right? So I used to do this training program on how to put together like information products. So I'd say, I have two agendas here today. My first one is to show you how in 48 hours or less, you can take a topic that you know very little bit about and create an information product that you can sell that would be of high quality. That's my first promise, or that's my first goal on this webinar today. My second goal is to sell you something. So this is how I'd start the webinar. It's like 1 minute in. I'd say, I got two objectives here today. My first one is to show you blank, and my second one is to sell you something. But here's the deal. If I do not deliver on my promise to show you blank, big promise, right? Then I absolutely demand that you not buy what I'm going to offer you at the end of the call. However, if I do somehow, some way make good on this very grandiose promise to blank, then you should feel obligated to purchase what I'm going to offer at the end of this webinar. Do we have a deal? And 99% of people, Mike, would always say yes. They'd say, sounds good to me. And I always laugh because I took this limitation and turned it into an advantage. And for most people, they also have that uncomfortableness. But we've gotten permission from the audience 1 minute in that if we meet this requirement, then we have earned the right to sell them something. And people respond to that for two reasons. Reason number one, this is a positioning concept. They're not used to it. And so immediately it's refreshing, which all authenticity is uncommon, unfortunately. The reason why most people go into sales situations like you're talking about is because they are assuming a role. They're like, well, I'm a professional, and a professional must act in this way, and a professional has to do these things, and especially working with corporate clients. It's like, says who, right?
Right.
But whatever, right? So they assume a role. So automatically they're inauthentic. And that's not intentional. It's just that's how we're programmed since the day we were born. Different contexts cue us in to assume certain roles for our survival, right? So that's the first reason, is it's great because it's different. But the second reason, in my opinion, the most important reason is the more we can get the presenter in that state of flow, in that state of totally at one with the audience and the materials, the better they will do from a communications impact and a sales standpoint. So when we remove that internal friction, we let that real person shine where they're not worried about the webinar technology. They're not worried about their slide font choices. They're not worried about how many people are on the webinar or not, right? They're just like, let's go. And that's when the real magic happens. Because again, how common is that in the marketplace? It is very uncommon that you get that. And so that's really powerful. So that's another example of just being purely authentic.
Right.
And we go on and on and on.
now you I want to preface what I'm about to ask you because, again, you're the guy behind the guy, somebody that I think has taught the marketplace a ton about webinars, has blatantly said in, I think, a couple books that he's written, on stage. He's mentioned it to me personally as I've become friends with him. Russell Brunson says he learned a lot from you. I don't know how long ago that was, but was it a couple years, 10 years ago, 5 years ago? How long would you say?
I don't really know, because Russell came into my sphere because I wrote this book, one of the first ever books on webinars, and he got his hands on it, and it was about belief patterns. So one of the trainings I used to teach back then, I don't teach it so much now because very few people can get it, unfortunately, but Russell got it right away, of how we take these belief patterns. Like, people will come into webinars belief in they can't possibly succeed under any circumstance. So I don't care how good your stuff is. I don't care how good you are. Until we de-link that behavior pattern, we've lost. We ain't gonna make any money, right? And so a lot of the webinars that I do look at what are these dominant belief limitations that people have? How can we disconnect those, repattern those to more empowering beliefs, and then position our offer at the end so they can step into it and understand that this is the way to take these newfound beliefs and magnify them. So Russell got so excited by that concept that not only he told me that it inspired him to write Expert Secrets, which has sold hundreds of thousands of copies, but I'm the most quoted expert in that book of Expert Secrets. So on webinars, that's pretty slick. So the first time I ever really met Russell, though, was around 2016. And I definitely will say, based on his teachings at least, that I probably had more influence on his webinars than anybody else. And so a lot of the foundation of what he learned came from me. I didn't even know it, because my goal for many years, I didn't want to teach people how to do webinars. I just did webinars. I just like to use them. Trust me, the last thing the market wants to learn is, okay, public speaking, that's scary as hell, right? Selling, oh my God, that's also scary. Technology, this ain't like sitting on a stage. It's like, we got to figure out all the tech and everything else, right? No, thank you. The market doesn't, the startup or the beginner internet entrepreneur, or even the existing ones, for many years, they did not want to learn how to do any of this stuff because it was too scary for them. So I'm like, I'd rather teach people how to sell on Amazon. Far more lucrative, far easier. And then I'll use webinars to deliver the messages, but reluctantly, because so many people kept asking me, hey, I want to, you need to teach us this webinar stuff. Or even worse, they would take my webinars, try to deconstruct them, and then learn from them, and they would miss some of the critical points. And it would drive me nuts, Mike. I'm like, okay, if you guys are going to do it, damn it, let's do it right. And so I've kind of been thrust into this training of how to do webinars only recently.
I love it. He was on our podcast as the GO.A.T. of marketing funnels, which clearly would make sense for a guy like him. For you, webinars, I want to ask you some quick rapid fire questions here on webinar, yes or no's, do's or don'ts. So I guess a great way to respond is do or don't. And then if you feel like you need to explain why, because may not make sense, feel free to dive in, okay?
Okay.
Camera on or camera off so they can see you during a webinar?
Doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay.
There's caveats.
Tell me what you mean by that.
If you're a skinny white chick teaching people how to, like suburban moms, how to lose weight, camera on makes a lot of sense, right? If you're teaching Photoshop tutorials, you don't need your camera on. And in fact, for some people, it'll get in the way. It is way down the list of things that really are needle movers when it comes to webinars. So do whatever is easiest.
Okay. I've heard people talk about doing webinars now using flip charts as opposed to sharing their screen in a keynote. So flip chart or do or don't?
All of the above, right? So find the modality that you are most effective in, make that your primary, but mix it up. So I've done webinars in any way, shape, or form. We started doing webinars on mind maps, right? So it's the worst thing you can do is be boring in marketing. So if flip charts get you out, flip it. I take my iPad sometimes and I scribble on it and show that on the screen, and that works as well. But ultimately for me, Keynote is where I go to more often than not. For most people, Keynote is probably going to be the most effective persuasion model that they could use.
More slides and less things on each slide, or less slides and more things on each slide?
More slides. I could take almost anybody's presentation that's doing well. If we double the slides, we will improve their sales by removing things from slides and making new slides. Joel Weldon said it best to me. He says, slides are free. I'm like, damn right they are. So I try to get about 500 slides per presentation.
Wow. And I know on there's different webinars I've seen. Would you say predominantly your slides are words that are basically coming out of your mouth and it's more like a video sales letter? Or would you say it's more pictures and you have a script and you know what each picture's saying?
Depends on the subject. But for the 80-20 of this is put some words on the screen because it's really easy to knock it out. And people, if they can hear the word and see the word, it's a lot more impactful than one or the other. The biggest mistake, though, that I see people make with slides is they don't show what they're talking about. So I don't mean stock photos or cool graphics, right? I mean, like when I teach my Amazon people, hey, Amazon pays you every 14 days like clockwork. I show them 3 emails of Amazon paying me money so they can see it in action. Far too people show what they're talking about. But once if the customer can see it in their mind, they're far more likely to buy. So don't talk about the article, show the article. Screenshots are really easy. So put some more into your slides.
Good. Allow participants to see how many participants there are or not?
Not because you're trying to hide any social proof. It's just that we don't want to distract them from the messaging. So we want to encourage them to interact, but with us, not with each other.
Pay attention to the chat during the presentation, at the end, or not at all, or both?
Depends. So if you have ADHD like me, probably not a good idea. I used to do it when I had smaller webinars, and I'm glad that I did because I could really calibrate with the audience. But after a while, I picked it up intuitively. What we do nowadays, this is professional level now, is we have team members from our company who are answering questions privately. We have somebody else who's flagging questions and dropping them into a shared Slack channel with me for that webinar so I can come back and hit them at the end and all that. And then I also will have my business partner, Will, on me too. And sometimes he might even step in because he knows when to cue in to address something as it shows up. So it's like it takes a village to do a webinar properly at the highest level. But when you're starting, do whatever you want. Because again, get the webinar in front of people and see how they react and then make adjustments. So if you want to look at chat, look at chat. The only thing I'd recommend is you let the audience know, hey, listen, chat's open. I want you to put your thoughts in as they come. I'm going to take a look at them again at the end. So stay tuned, right? Or you might say, listen, every 15 minutes or so, we're going to take a break, answer a few questions before we proceed. That's how we're going to run it. So it's your world. Do it however you want to. Just let the audience know, and then they will conform with whatever expectation you give them.
At the end of the webinar, and it's time to transition to price, is it better to sell something that's well, actually, what I like to know is ideally, what's the ticket size that's a great, like generally a good ticket size to sell? And then how does that work on the back end to ascend somebody up or anybody that didn't show? What would that look like?
Fantastic question. So in most markets, $500 is going to be your low price that I would look at. If you're doing less than that, do a video sales letter or do something else. You generally, the upper threshold is about $2,000 to $2,500, again, depending on the market. If it goes above that price point, you're better off sending them to a phone call or some other process before you sell them. Caveat, existing customers, different set of rules. Because they already have an established relationship with you, you can even go higher price points than that. But for most markets, especially if you're starting out, your sweet spot's going to be between $500 and $1,000. So my favorite thing to do is this. So let's take what we have and use it. This is positioning, right? It's like, go to your audience if you've never done a webinar and just say, if you have an audience, let's just assume you have an audience, right? Free or paid, it doesn't matter, whatever. You just got people you can get in front of. And you say this, you say, listen up. I've never done a webinar before, but I want to do a webinar because I think it'll be helpful to you. And I got something that I'd like to sell you at the end of the webinar after I've helped you. Okay. Now, I've never done a webinar before, so come and see if it'll be a train wreck or see if it'll be any good, right? The one thing I will promise you is if you're willing to be my guinea pig, I am going to hook you up with an insane deal that I normally wouldn't do. And as soon as I get a little bit more confident and actually get some experience under my belt, I will never make an offer this good again. But it's sort of my way of just getting you on so I can get the experience I need to start adding webinars to my marketing repertoire, right? And you will not believe how responsive your audience will be. They want to help you out. They're like, part of them wants to see the train wreck. Is he going to screw up or not? Okay, so they're excited. So there's some drama to that. Everybody wants a good deal. I mean, Black Friday, hello, right? People love to shop. We're making it an event now. We're getting them enlisted into the cause and getting them excited. And then we can get that experience. And then the price point will increase because, Mike, here's the funniest thing. The difference between selling something for $500 and $2,000 is very rarely the value of the thing. It is mostly the confidence in the presenter. That is the main differentiator between somebody that can sell a product for $500 or the same product for $2,000. And by the way, from a customer standpoint, if you're half sold on a product and you pay me money, you're less likely to be successful than if you're fully sold on the product. So it's contagious. If I believe in your success, then you're more likely to believe in your success. Therefore, you're more likely to be successful. But if you barely can buy in, which usually $500 price points are easier for people to swallow, so they'll buy in half sold and they'll get zero results. So what would you rather have? Some results for $1,000 or no results for $500? I think the answer is obvious, isn't it?
I love it. Live webinars or evergreen where they're just running and every 15 minutes like you see people do?
Two completely separate skill sets. So live webinars generally make sense for most companies, but evergreen webinars have their place too. But if you think you can take a live webinar, make a couple adjustments and turn it into an evergreen webinar, 9 times out of 10, you will fail miserably. So I like to think two separate functions, right? Just like if I'm doing sales, I'm going to act differently than if I'm doing a webinar. If I'm doing evergreen, it's a whole different process than if I'm doing live. But yeah, ideally you should do both. Now, by the way, do whatever one's going to get you in front of the market as fast as possible. So if you say, Jason, I can't do live webinars, even though I understand they would be better in my instance, any webinar is better than no webinar. So then just do an evergreen webinar. Eventually you will do both if you are committed.
Got it. When you're doing webinars, sometimes you may have competition come in to check out and see what you do. Do you ever screen applicants beforehand or no?
Not normally. We like it when the competition comes in.
Okay.
For a number of reasons, right? There's a good chance, Mike, that I will sell my competition because I am that compelling on a webinar. So bring grandma and grandpa, bring the dog. There's more people for me to sell. I'm game, right? If it's true trade secret style stuff or it's very sensitive in nature, we charge for it. Because then if my competitors are going to come in and try to steal it, at least they had to pay the privilege to attempt to steal it. So there's times where it makes sense to make webinars paid. Very rarely, by the way. But there are times where it makes sense to charge for a webinar up front to have that kind of barrier to entry, not just from a competitor lockout standpoint, right? But also because customers who pay are more likely to pay more attention.
Okay. Last rapid fire question, and then I want to jump into your second skill set, which is market positioning. So last rapid fire question, you say you like live better generally, especially if they're new because it's a whole different skill set. How often would you say it's a good idea to do a live webinar? Every day, every week? So for example, I was thinking about on my website having something that says join our next live webinar at the top. So it's just a banner and people can register for the next live one. Would it make sense to have one every day, every 3 times a week, once a week? What would you say?
Generally speaking, once a week works best. And I wouldn't make in this case, and this is all very technical here, right? So it's like every situation is different. In this particular case, give them something very attractive to opt into that is not a webinar. And then once you have them on your email list, start inviting them. Hey, this Thursday, we're going to do this webinar. This is the topic. And then at the end, I'm going to make you an offer. And then next Thursday, this is the topic. At the end, I'm going to make you an offer. Now, the offer can always be the same. And a lot of the content can be the same too, by the way. It's just the different hooks, which is part of the positioning, which we are going to talk about here next. But I would generally do once a week. And here's why. Because it gives your market enough time to relax a little bit, but it also gives you time to think. You do a webinar, the real value is what happens after the webinar. You can read through the chat logs. You can observe, hey, I thought this thing was going to get people excited and there was just crickets in the chat, right? On the other hand, this throwaway line that I said just out of the side of my mouth, not even thinking, that lit the chat on fire. Isn't that interesting? Maybe we can make some adjustments, right? And again, I always have this agreement with my audience. I'm testing material out to try to find the most compelling, captivating way to show you how to do this and sell you on this.
Right.
So each week you come and I'm testing new material out. So please be my test subject. And again, the market is excited about that. They get enlisted as long as the content is good. You get on a webinar and your content sucks, you don't deserve to have people come back. So nail the content and the rest generally can be tweaked.
Now, clarification on one of the things you said. When I gave you the idea of like somebody putting a banner on their site that's static and it just says webinar, I think you said rather than telling people to come into a webinar, it's better to give them something that would be like valuable that they would want right now to get them on your email list, and then email them about a webinar coming up. So let's say.
Could even be on the thank you page, Mike. Hey, you've opted in the email inbox is your gift. Meanwhile, we have this webinar coming up Thursday. Okay. Here's why. Instant gratification. So to a complete stranger who'd never heard from you before, having to opt in for a webinar that takes place in the distant far future of Thursday when it's Monday, you probably lost the game no matter what, right? So we want to wow somebody while we have their attention. So we give them something enticing to capture their information in exchange for something good, right? And then we can continue the conversation privately via email. So step one is let's get them on an email list. And then step two, let's market the webinar to them.
When they get to that page to download whatever it is, let's say it's like the best sales script in the industry, whatever it is that they're going to download, on the thank you page, should you mention the webinar or should you just mention it?
Doesn't really matter.
Doesn't matter?
Best by test. Eventually, if you're having impact, then you're going to test different options to see what works best. But up front, if we overthink our marketing, we lose the game before we even begin to play it. And that's unfortunate. So speed of service is what I always talk about, SOS, because I like to pretend customers are dying because they're drowning in a water. And I'm on the side saying, do we flow them this life raft or do we flow them this flotation device? And meanwhile, they're like, help me out, you son of a bitch, I'm dying. And you're like, well, this one's pink. I don't know. Should we do that, right? Let's save them first, speed of service, SOS. And then later on, we can figure out how do we save more of them more efficiently. So thank you page, maybe not, whatever works best. Try it out. Get in front of audience as quickly as you can on a webinar. That's the goal. But we will miss them generally more often than not if we promise a benefit far off into the future versus download this as a script that you can immediately use on your next sales call. People are like, oh, I want that. Boom.
I love it. I love it. Your second, you might even say it's your first. I don't know, because again, you're the guy behind the guy. So whoever really knows what your best thing is until they work with you and then they can tell you. But from what I understand, it's market positioning as well. Yep. So first, let's define what is market positioning, and then maybe give me an example of how somebody that's watching right now can use it. You can use whatever industry you like to make your point.
So let me ask you this question, Mike. What is the most profitable company right now in existence?
Amazon?
No, believe it or not. Amazon's got the biggest footprint online, but they are not the most profitable company.
Exxon,
right
Apple,
now.
One of those two?
Apple.
Yep. Okay.
Apple is the master of positioning. They're the quintessential example of what positioning stands for. Because once upon a time, if you wanted to buy a computer, you had an industrial gray, I'm a geek, nerdy option. And that's it. That was the market. Because it was a bunch of engineers, right? And it was a bunch of techno people doing this hobby of building computers. And, to the most part, Microsoft for many years still suffered from that, where it was their machines were not cool looking. They got the job done. They were highly functional, right? What Apple did was make a computer a designer brand. They made technology a brand like Gucci would be in the apparel industry. And so they made you want to buy a computer because you look cool carrying it around, not because the computer was a better computer than the next guy's computer, right? That is positioning to the max. So that's an example. Let me give you another one. Tesla, right? Before Tesla, Prius was trying to get off the ground with electric cars. And what was essentially Prius's position? Like if you had to sum it up on a bumper sticker.
Yeah, electric car, hybrid, or just being able to be more efficient on the road, not spending money on gas.
What was the big appeal though? What were they appealing to?
People that want to save the world.
Exactly. Tree huggers, hippies, and I'm kind of joking, but not so much, right? Suburban ex-hippies who now have grown up, have jobs, but want to still be socially conscious and eco-conscious and eco-friendly, right? Boring. And that's why Prius didn't really get very far. Elon Musk says, you want a car that goes from 0 to 60 faster than anything under $1 million on the road? I got you, baby. I got you, right? And he made owning an electric car cool, not just, a smelly ex-hippie driving a car to save the world. He made you want to buy it because it was cooler than a Porsche, not because it was electric. And
hold on, I got because I've never thought about that before, but you're so right. I remember, up until Apple really kind of made that big comeback when Steve Jobs came back that second time, I remember in 2004, 2002, 2001, people would make fun of people that were on computers. Like you were kind of a nerd or a geek. That's what people thought you as. You'd be a computer guy. He's a computer guy. That was the phrase. And you just felt like this guy that had like pens in your pocket and tape between the middle of your glasses to keep it together. And that's kind of like the person that would use a computer. Whereas today, yeah, like it's weird if you don't have one, and it's weird if you have a weird one. Like it's cool to have more technology became cool. I got the iPad, I got the Mac, I got the MacBook, I got the pencil, I've got it all. Whereas back then that would have been weird. And then the electric thing, I totally remember before Tesla came out. People that were driving Priuses were getting made fun of. It was like corny to be a person that wants to save the world. It was weird. And why is it weird? I mean, you ultimately want to do a good thing. And Elon Musk comes in and goes, actually saving the world's pretty damn cool. We're going to go to freaking space. On top of that, we're going to build these underground tunnels to Vegas. He could have started underground tunnels in like Austin, Texas, but he goes, let's do LA and Vegas, the two coolest places and party places. And then he's got all these, he's got Fire, the boring company. He's got torches he's selling. He's got the electric car. He's making saving the world a really cool thing, which it's crazy he transitioned that mindset.
He gets it. And so like the other one is like Beats by Dre. Before them, like Bose headphones owned that higher end market. But Beats by Dre got poor college kids to spend $300 on headphones that are not even really that audiophile. They don't sound as good as a high fidelity headphone would, right? They have a lot more bass, but the most important thing is you look freaking cool when you put them on the subway with your iPod back then and your Beats, right? You might be able to get chicks if you're a dude. So you're buying headphones not to hear sounds better, but to pick up women. And those are examples at a high mainstream level of positioning. None of that is really applicable to what we do other than as an exercise to understand positioning. But it proves my point is obviously Tesla's a good car or was a good car. I've owned Teslas for like 6 years. They're having some issues now, growth pains, all that kind of stuff, right? But when they came out, Consumer Reports at the time gave them the highest safety rating that ever existed. They're more electric efficient than a Prius. You can go on a further charge than them. They look nice. They have some really cool features that are unique to them or were unique to them. So they do everything that everybody else does. Pretty much more or less incrementally better or slightly less. But then they give something, they transcend the appeal of just the product and they go one step further. And so, Apple as well. You could argue, is Apple better than a PC? For some things it is, for some things it's not. You want to, the gamers, which is a multi-billion dollar industry. I think it's $1 trillion industry. None of them use Apple computers because the way that a PC function is a gamer can work with a PC. A gamer can't do anything with a Mac. But so it's funny because in certain industries, PC has a death grip, a dominant threshold, like in the business community at the big corporate level, they do. So different positions and different appeals for different things. However, the point is the point. The point is everybody's thinking about the product. The product is one consideration. How do we position ourselves so the following can happen? We are the only one in the market. Therefore, we own the market. Therefore, If anybody comes into the market, they're a me too. You ever seen a Microsoft store after you've seen an Apple store?
Yeah.
You ever seen them?
Yeah.
It's comical. I never saw one until years later. And it's a knockoff, a poor knockoff of an Apple store.
It is.
And it's so cheesy because it's so off brand. So you either copy and look at it as a second-rate Xerox version of the originator, right? So you already lose there, or you stay the hell away. What you lose either way. So my idea is, how do we position something so when the customer sees it, they say, you and you alone, you own the domain of this particular specific thing. And then that allows us to really outserve every other competitor. Because by the time anybody tries to catch up, by the time any big corporate competitors come in with super deep pockets, they can't buy our customers. They want to buy us instead, potentially, right? To me, all things start with positioning. So if I'm going to create a webinar, what's the position we're going to take? That is the $1 million question. Once I answer that, that's at a micro level. There's micro positioning and there's macro positioning. At the micro level, though, what am I going to say to the customer to give them that aha moment where they say, wow, when it comes to this topic, I've never had any more insight than I'm having right now. You are the de facto #1 top dog when it comes to blank. And that to me is positioning.
You know, I got a question because a lot of people that are watching and listening right now, they might be thinking, what could I do? What's my unique thing? Okay, you know, Steve Jobs went, everyone thinks people are nerds here. Let me change the perspective. And Elon Musk is like, okay, these people here, you know, nerds, let me change the perspective. And I could see what you're saying. What about companies where they didn't necessarily come into something new like that? So you take PlayStation and Xbox. PlayStation owned the market at one point. Xbox came in and I don't know. I haven't looked to see what the numbers are. But to me, it feels like they're neck and neck. If I meet someone, it seems to be 50-50 that you're either a PlayStation guy or an Xbox guy. Did Xbox have anything that was unique, or did they just come in and do something as good, or what?
They had capital, right? So, you know, now we're getting really geeky on the marketing, but it's vertical integration. Because we already have this, we can bolt this onto it. It's no different than how Walmart has pharmacies inside of them and salons in them, and you get your tire changed. So you could simultaneously might get a haircut, get your oil change, and pick up your prescription to Viagra while you're in Walmart shopping for groceries, right? It's like, that's awesome from the vertical integration standpoint. So sometimes you don't want to be the leader. You just want to be generally in markets. So in an immature market, and sorry, I'm getting so geeky here. Hopefully your listeners will like this. This is the kind of stuff that we only talk about in the big boardrooms, because otherwise it's hard to figure out how to apply it to most businesses. But there's two markets. There's immature markets and there's mature markets. So I'm gonna name a couple markets, and you tell me if you feel like they're mature or immature markets. Okay. So let's talk about. Let's pick a first market. Like the oil/gas market. Is that a mature market or an immature market?
Mature.
Yeah, it is a mature, because pretty much the owners own the market. Let's talk search, search engines in terms of looking for information online.
Mature.
Is that a mature market or an immature market?
Mature. Google owns it.
Yeah, it's mature. There's Google and then there's Bing. Now, by the way, people laugh at Bing. Bing has a pretty damn big market share. It has like 12%, right? Who's number 3? What's it called? Like DuckDuckGo. I think they're number 3 right now. Okay. Wow. The cola market. Is that a mature market or is that an immature market?
Mature.
Totally mature. Coca-Cola owns like 80%. Pepsi owns like 17%. And I think Royal Crown Cola owns like 3%. That's generally all markets as they mature. There's a dominant. There is the antithesis of that person, right? So at one point in time, Windows owned the market, and Apple came out with the 1984 commercial and said, "You're big corporate, we're cool hipster," right? Now it's funny because Apple is as corporate as they come, right? But that positioning can go a long ways. But you're either the leader, you're making your marketing based upon the leader, or you're in danger of losing, because almost all mature markets have a 1-2 with a hanger on their third. Now, let's talk cryptocurrency. Is that a mature market or is that an immature market?
Immature.
It's totally immature. Right now, it is Bitcoin that owns it, kind of, but that's not a for sure thing. And it certainly won't last forever. Now, maturity and immaturity doesn't mean age and time, because the automotive industry had been mature forever. And right now, I would say the automotive industry is immature, not only just because of companies like Tesla. By the way, Tesla, it doesn't even economically, their stock price makes 0 sense. You tell me they're actually worth what the market cap is, but it's worth whatever the customer feels that it's worth. And so
right.
I guess it is worth, now Elon is one of the richest people in the whole world. I think he's number 3 or something like that.
No, he just passed,
but
he
it's
just
becoming,
passed Bill Gates. He's number 2 right now.
He's number 2 now, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that insane?
Yep.
From a fledgling car company that has came and disrupted, GM and Ford and Chevy, right? Retail is now disrupted. Everybody thought it was mature. Walmart was there, but now retail is being disrupted again. So eventually mature markets will be disrupted and become immature. But generally speaking, mature markets, I don't want to get into them. I would rather create a new market within a mature market, a growing segment, a rising segment that is not important enough for the big players to capitalize on. But also has a moat, meaning that I'm not going to prove the market for them and then they pull the rope, the rug out from under my feet either, right? So most of us are in immature markets. So Mike, you're in a market right now. Let's classify what market you're actually in. So you sell.
We help fitness studios and gyms throughout the world with their advertising and then business training and community. So it's the best on the planet in all 3 categories.
All right, so that's what you are. That is a very well-defined, very specific market, which congratulations. That is awesome. The idea, this is all I say when I talk about strategic positioning. There's two ways we can win more money in poker. Mike, you play poker?
Yes.
Yeah, me too. You play good or you play poorly?
Depends on who else is at the table.
Well, you're already one step ahead of me, right? Yep. But I'm asking you, because if you said, Jason, I'm not very good, but I enjoy it, then I ask you, do you like to bet? And you say, yeah, I'm going to want to play you in poker, right?
Right.
Because there's a good chance I'm going to win some money off you. But if you said, Jason, I'm really good, no, thank you, Mike. I don't want to play poker with you. And so people generally only have one thought process, which limits them. They say, if I want to get better at poker, I'm going to study game theory. I'm going to learn bluffing and reading and tells. I'm going to know the mathematical probabilities. And they're going to want to increase skill set, right? And I'm going to say, find me a table with a bunch of rich, really dumb poker players who are horrible at it, but love to just bet for the thrill of betting. They don't care if they win or lose. I want to be at that table because I don't have to get better at poker, but I'll make more money than most professional poker players ever make. Or the other one that I like to do is if I'm going to run a race, I want to run a race against 4-year-old kids because I will win that race, hopefully every single time. It doesn't pay more to run against world-class athletes. So let's find markets where we can have a big splash just by entering those markets. So there is no dominant name in your market. And what I mean by that is nobody owns quote unquote shelf space. Right. There's a finite amount in any market of advertising available, unless you're willing to pay a premium, right? There's a finite amount of distribution available. There's a finite amount of vendor relationships. There are certain vendor contracts that can only be made with one company exclusively, or there's a conflict of interest, right? There's a certain amount of talent that's available to be hired in any given market, right? Mm-hmm. And so if somebody has a lock on some or all of those resources, I don't want to play that game. Right. Maybe I can win, but why? There's many easier businesses that exist out there that can make more money. So that's the first concept, but you're in an emerging market. You're in what we call an immature market. And so you might be able to own that market, but right now it's up for grabs. The cool thing though, is you have a very dominant position in that market. For what you do, correct me if I'm wrong, you are perceived as the best, generally speaking, for the people that you reach out to. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so you have the position because there's only one position to be in, and that's the number 1 position.
If you ain't first, you're last.
And if you enter in the number 1 position, start something that can make you into the number 1 position. Pivot if you must, or change or open up a new business unit. So let me give you another example. What's Amazon's most profitable market segment of Amazon? The one thing that on a profit basis makes them more money than anything else.
Their e-commerce.
Nope.
Really?
Their web hosting.
Really?
AWS, their web services. Yep.
Get out of here.
As a net profit contribution, that makes them more money than anything, right? And so What's powerful is when
Because
you become
the
number one.
margins are better there. So that's why, right?
Yeah, of course they are, right? It's sort of a trick question, right?
Yeah.
Is Amazon in the web services businesses? Kind of, right? They're really in the e-com business. But as a strategic byproduct, once you're number one in one category, it becomes infinitely easier to become number one in other categories, even categories that are seemingly unrelated. Because what does web services have to do with e-commerce? On one hand, nothing. But on the other hand, it's their own infrastructure. So they built their own infrastructure and then they were able to leverage it. And so, for example, right now you can leverage your intelligence of what you know about the market and your positioning to try a new unit. In this case, when I talked to you about webinars, this was the advice that I gave you, is appeal to the trainer, the end user, who's going out there that's more mom and pop style. And you can do that through education and information and perhaps even software. So you can still maintain the service business, which I think fundamentally you've nailed that. So we want to accelerate what you're already doing. We don't want to innovate necessarily. We want to accelerate that point in time. But a new business unit potentially that could be spun up based on your proof, on your expertise, on your knowledge, on your connections, right? That is perhaps for the taking. If you fail, who cares? It's not a big deal. But if you succeed, you now can disrupt an existing other business market that right now you have no position in. And so that's generally how we think, right? So when we got into the Amazon business, which made us $10 million, we built an Amazon business, Mike, not because we were trying to get rich off it, just so we could talk intelligently about Amazon. And we did okay with the business. We made like $1 million or so gross on that business per year. But what was better is I now understood the business inside and out, so I could converse with clients, understand what they do, and then kind of be the translator and report to the market what was and wasn't working, because I was more dialed in to everything on Amazon. And that was a position. We were able to own a very unique position of how we positioned ourselves in the Amazon market. Now, all markets change. So if you don't change with them, you're going to die. And it's amazing how many companies that were Fortune 100 companies 50 years ago don't exist anymore. It's fascinating. Do that research sometime if you're listening to this podcast and be astounded, because yesterday's Walmart, which was Woolworths, right, does not exist today. And so you have to consistently defend your position as number one and or pivot to new number ones that you can be in the business if you want longevity. Sometimes it's nice to have a little part-time gig that just pays the bills and makes you some money and you can screw around. That's not how I'm wired though, right? And so in this particular instance, we got to be looking at what the markets were. So on Amazon, we discovered as everybody went this way, it changed the dynamics of the market. So then we were able to then reposition based on our existing position into a new business inside of Amazon. And that's still where most of our money is made today. Purely understanding the positioning of the marketing. So the idea is if you want to chop down a tree, you sharpen your axe before. You don't spend all the time chopping the tree down. You spend more time sharpening the axe, right? It's like opportunities are the same way. What opportunities can you bring a sharp axe to? And what opportunities are you only bringing a dull axe to?
Yeah, when you and I spoke a few days ago, you were telling me about that. You do something with Amazon that brings you on autopilot a great amount of money every month at this point, right? You built a business.
For years, it brought a net $1 million into our business purely on its own on autopilot.
Every year or every?
It was $3 million in 2017, then $2 million in 2018, then $1 million in 2019. I think this year we'll finally not break $1 million, but purely because it was unmanaged. It was the garden that was producing golden eggs that now has some weeds in it. But it's fascinating when you do own a dominant position, how easy it is for you to give value to customers that's incomparable by anybody else in that market. But yeah, you're right. Fortunately, because I made a lot of dumb decisions in other areas of the business and I got humbled in it, but it's easy when you have $1 million of income coming in hands off, right? Mike, I am the only marketer that Zoom has brought in, the multi-billion-dollar company Zoom that we're streaming this from right now or recording this on, that they brought me in there to teach their webinar users how to be more effective at webinars. And they allowed me then to actually generate leads from Zoom in exchange for us educating their users. And so I love that concept of, if we want to measure it, where's the impact at, is a lot of people have done a lot of stuff on webinars. I'm the only one that Zoom, who's now the number one de facto webinar company in the world, has brought in. And by the way, they brought me in February. They went IPO in April, right? Coincidence? Yeah, it was totally a coincidence, but maybe not. No, I'm kidding.
They blew up at the right time for sure.
Yeah, I wish I would have invested in their stock, but that's an area where I have no expertise in. So I don't try to play where I don't know what I'm doing.
I get it. For everyone that's watching and listening right now, it's pretty clear to them you know your stuff, and a lot of them probably do want to work with you. So how does somebody work with you, or how do they follow you? How do they learn more from you if they want to continue getting more outside of this podcast episode?
So the best thing to do is go to Amazon and buy my book, One to Many. It's the highest rated book on webinars on the whole Amazon. Should be the #1 rated book as well. And that gives my whole blueprint on how we sell on webinars a very specific way. So for like a whopping $10 if you buy it on Kindle, I got the hardback over there. Should have been better prepared. But I have a 4-step process. When I'm selling like coaching programs or information products, knowledge products, or courses that are very easy where information is the primary thing, or software. We do this with software too. I have a 4-step process on how I develop webinars, and all my scripts are laid out in there. Everything shows you from here's what you want to do in the introduction. Here's how you want to position your content. Here's how you transition to a pitch. And here's the closes that you can use. So One to Many, get that book. It is the hardest thing I've ever worked on that I charge the least amount of money for.
I love it. Well, thanks so much, man, for giving us so much of your time and so much information. For everybody watching, we just spent time with the GOAT of webinars, Jason Fladlien, also a pretty solid expert on market positioning. Jason, thanks so much. I'm looking forward to getting to know you better and better. For everybody watching and listening, thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us today. If you like this episode, subscribe to our YouTube channel or find our podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, or wherever your favorite place to listen to podcasts might be. And if you really like this episode, please leave a review for us on iTunes. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.